Oh, there he is. That's what I'm talking. He's the one I'm talking about. Bernie Sanders in the house. Bernie, 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 Bernie.
I do criticize him. I just don't call him a coward in these things. However, Bernie strikes me right now as kind of doing what Obama did. Like, Obama ran on all these platitudes, but he had this massive organizing army, and he left them on the White House lawn. I mean, he didn't use it, and then just threw up his hands and said, well, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan can't do anything. I mean, Bernie didn't win the presidency, but I mean, his Slack channel has more people than DSA has signed up. I mean, just the sheer apparatus that Bernie's campaign over 4 years created, you could be doing serious things. And if you want to take him at face value, maybe you disagreed, but all right, he said, we're going to get Biden in, and then we're going to fight him on day one. Well, it's day one, and I don't really hear anything from Bernie right now. I'm pretty sure he's smart enough to know he's not going to get a White House parking pass, much less labor secretary. Why do you think he's not using that army? Because right now you just have these different islands, Sunrise Movement, Justice Democrats, but it's not an organized progressive movement to tap into this leverage you're speaking of.
I love the brother, and you know, even in love, people have deep disagreements about these things. But I think, again, he's fearful of the neo-fascism of Trump. People look at Biden, they don't really want to tell the full truth. He's created the best economy that we can get. Is this the best that we can get? You're going to tell that lie to the people just for Biden to win?
I'm not looking to be unduly pessimistic here, but I do believe in honesty. And I don't think you can move forward if you don't have an accurate picture of the present. The left isn't just anemic and in despair because it's perpetually disorganized or because they're licking their wounds over a political loss. It's also not just because this is an incredibly depressing historical moment that we are all living through, although that certainly doesn't help. I think there are really three pieces here to think about. First was the way in which Bernie's loss occurred. Now, I just watched this Bernie Blackout documentary, which is well done. It is somewhat torturous to relive all the ups and downs of the incredibly abbreviated primary. But most painful was to watch all of the hopeful energy and optimism and organizers and workers sending in their $10 and students knocking on doors and the willingness to believe that things could be different, that things could be better. To actually invest their emotional energy and then watch as someone who barely campaigned had the waters parted for him by Obama and an overwhelming media propaganda narrative. To be so close to having a shot at real change and then watch it all crumble in record-breaking time from a massive coordinated establishment effort fed a sense that the project not only failed, but was perhaps doomed from the outset. Second was the way in which Bernie bent the knee. Now, it was one thing to watch Bernie get out of the race prematurely, in my view, when he could have stayed in longer to gain more leverage and provide a viable alternative should additional questions and credible allegations arise regarding Joe's past. It was another thing to watch Bernie's cringeworthy live stream with his friend Joe and see all the people who hated him and trashed him and would have gone to any lengths to stop him come out with all of their faux praise. But the real killer was to see Bernie actually chastise his supporters who were not ready to climb on board with a candidate who doesn't share their values or their view of politics. Now, I understand why Bernie views the landscape as he does, and I really do believe that he thinks he is acting in what is national interest. But in that moment, not only did it seem like the project was potentially doomed, it appeared that the revolutionary rhetoric had been just that, rhetoric. And now the revolutionary was trying to sell us on the transformational change of some task forces, seemingly abandoning his legacy of unvarnished truth-telling to be just like all the rest, willing to sacrifice every principle and 40-year-long ideal in service of beating Trump, fully buying into the lesser of two evils framework that leads to endless hell and the fundamental impossibility of real change. After all, why would the corporatists offer anything better if they can just be slightly better than the bad guy?
From political revolution to political dodgeball. Bernie Sanders was on Meet the Press this morning, and with all the caveats that obviously I respect everything Bernie has done for the progressive movement. I am not declaring him a sellout or a fraud. I got to keep it real. This was very disappointing, particularly him dodging questions on Cornel West's third-party run, his somewhat, in my view, undemocratic answer on whether there should be a real Democratic primary, among other answers. Let's start with his straight up dodging on questions regarding Cornel West's third party run.
He said just with Senator Sanders and some other friends reintroducing Medicare for all. So they reintroduced Medicare for all because all of a sudden now, after the Democrats don't have any power, now they want to push for Medicare for all. I wonder if this is going to set it back. Aren't we on the 1 yard line? And if you do this, it's going to push us back. We're going to have to punt. Is it you're going to actually push for Medicare for all? I thought. Oh, so when they actually had the leverage to do something about it, they didn't. And now that they don't, this is called virtue signaling. This is Bernie Sanders virtue signaling. He's never going to fight for you to get Medicare for all. He's never going to use his leverage, and neither is Representative Pramila Jayapal. In fact, when they had leverage and activists like us tried to get them to use their leverage, they called us violent and said that we were setting the movement back because they will never fight for you. Bernie Sanders is never going to fight for you. Bernie Sanders right now is the cuck of all cucks, and this is nothing but a virtue signal. And you want to see so this guy tweets it out. This guy, Congressman Greg Casar, he got like 900 likes on it. He's a congressman. He's introducing Medicare for all, one of the most popular things in the goddamn country. He could only muster 900 likes. Why is that? Because people don't like Medicare for all, or because they know you're full of shit. That's the I'm going to show you the first three tweets underneath his tweet. I'm going to show you them. This is the first one. Fool me once, you're not fooling me again. They know you're full of shit. That had 102 likes. The one calling the congressman full of shit. Here's the next one. Savage Joy Marie makes the show. She said, I've yet to see any of you marching with us at our over 60 nationwide actions demanding national improved Medicare for all. 60. Had 60. None of those people showed up. Bernie Sanders didn't show up. He didn't even mention it. He even mentioned when we had Medicare for all marches. Not only did Bernie Sanders not show up, so Bernie Sanders is a cuck and a liar. And he's now your enemy. I know that sounds crazy, right? But he agrees with me. No. What he agrees with is not ever helping you and doing what Joe Biden says and the establishment says. Medicare for all is 100% volunteer, and we get in the streets and we actually fight for the change we need. This is simply a talking point for you all. To us, it's life or death. It's fundraising season. Why is Bernie Sanders out there? This is fun to get. Everybody's getting ready to run. There's fundraising. There's fundraising now that they're out of power. You can't go, well, why don't you just vote on it? They can't do that. Why didn't they submit it when the Democrats had control of Congress? It's because they're all phony frauds. Bernie's a fraud. Representative Pramila Jayapal's a fraud. They're just as big of frauds as the Republicans. They're frauds, except the Republicans aren't promising you Medicare for all. So that's the second one, Savage Joy Marie. Here's the third one. The Dems wouldn't even allow a vote on it the 2 years they controlled the House. They controlled the House for 2 years, and the Democrats wouldn't allow a vote on Medicare for all in the middle of what they said was a deadly pandemic. Must be re-election season again. Exactly right. Elected politicians talking about Medicare for all must be campaign season. They know what you're doing, Bernie.
Did an interview with him. As we all know, Cornel West is now running for the Green Party nomination for President of the United States. And there's this little clip here I wanted to show you. I found this interesting for a number of reasons, so let's listen and then we'll react.
And it's true that, Brother Bernie, I'd always tell him, and, he's my dear brother forever, but I always tell him, he got to be true to himself. And in being true to himself, he's not the kind of brother that goes for the jugular. I'm a different kind of brother. I'm a different kind. You know what I mean? I'm a different kind of brother. We on stage and we singing Ebony and Ivory. He gonna sing in his tune, and I'm gonna sing in mine. Right. And we still brothers, but we sing at a different kind of a different kind of style, a different kind of way of going at it. Now, of course, he had righteous indignation at Wall Street, and he would go over the jugular when it came to Wall Street greedy elites and so forth. But I think one has to have that same or similar sensibility when it comes to militaristic policies abroad, imperial policy abroad, as well as the corruption and the role of big money in both parties. Mm. And I mean, it's a way of saying, well, you know, how do you decommodify healthcare? How do you decommodify campaign finance? How do you demilitarize your foreign policy? How do you decarbonize the air? Well, all of these have something to do with the organized greed at the top.
So the comment on Bernie is what I found most interesting. He's saying Bernie doesn't really go for the jugular, I do. And of course, he doesn't in his classic Cornel West way. A lot of love and affection and adoration. I still get giddy every time I hear him say, like, Brother Bernie, or, you know, Brother Kyle. He's called me Brother Kyle when he was on Crystal Kyle and Friends, and he's just a lovely, lovely man. So look, on the substance of what he's saying here, this has always been my biggest bone to pick with Bernie Sanders. Now, I love Bernie, and Bernie awakened an entire generation to what's possible politically. But the fact of the matter is, his biggest misstep ever since, you know, climbing the mountain and being the head lefty, the left leader, his biggest misstep was when he dropped out to support Joe Biden, he did not get the policy extractions that he could have gotten. You know, I remember when Bernie announced his endorsement of Joe Biden, it was like a hostage video. Where, do you support $15 minimum wage, Joe? He's like, yeah, Bernie, I think that's a good idea. And then, like, a lot of these things he didn't follow through on. So, you know, at the time, I was screaming from the top of my lungs, the best thing for Bernie to do is to meet with Joe Biden in private and give him a list of executive orders specifically that are in his power that he could do. For example, under the Bayh-Dole Act, Biden has the ability as president to just lower all prescription drug prices across the board. Because under that act, if there was taxpayer money that went into funding the research and development for a drug, then the U.S. government can control the price. So he has the authority. In the past 20 years, there's been no drug that's been made without taxpayer assistance. You can just lower drug prices across the board. That's one example. You could not only legalize marijuana completely, but you could free all the nonviolent drug offenders who are locked up at the federal level. There's a number of things he could do. Now, some of these things, Biden's done half measures, right? Like the student loan debt reduction. His plan was pretty good, Biden's plan, but it still didn't go all the way and get rid of all the student loan debt, right? But Bernie had Biden where he wanted him, because Biden would have given a lot of concessions to get that Bernie endorsement, because it's super important to be unified going into the general election, and he could have used his leverage. List 10 things that are very, very crystal clear. Here's the executive order I want. You could literally draft the executive orders in the specific language and be like, this is, if you sign on to signing these executive orders, I will be your number one cheerleader. Instead, he just got like vague concessions of like, yeah, I'll support $15 minimum wage and stuff that involves Congress. But Biden has less control over Congress, right? What he does have control of is the executive branch. He could have demanded, as commander-in-chief, no more aid to Israel, no more aid to Saudi Arabia. He could have demanded these things. He didn't, right? So he didn't go for keep it real, he did not go for the jugular. He just didn't. And so if he did that approach, then honestly, I would have become the biggest Biden bro back in 2020. I would have been arguing from the top of my lungs to go vote for Joe Biden. He's already agreed to these 10 very specific executive order concessions, and these are huge wins for everybody. So I think the criticism of Bernie is legitimate. He doesn't go for the jugular. But my criticism of Cornel West is, you are by definition not going for the jugular if you're running as a third-party candidate. Look, I want to be kind to you, and I love Cornel West, and I got nothing against the Green Party. I voted for many Green Party candidates, but keep it real. It is by definition not going for the jugular if you have zero prayer of winning. Sorry. It's just a fact.
Because I don't think I understand your anger. I don't think he's a coward. I think he's really bad at politics. I think he's really bad at power politics.
Okay, we could, whatever descriptors we want to use, but Kyle Kalinske calls him a cuck, I call him a coward, you call him bad at politics. When the rubber meets the road, Bernie Sanders capitulated to the machine. Bernie Sanders threw his movement under the bus. Bernie Sanders didn't extract anything for after 4 years, did nothing. They cheated him. He did nothing to make sure they didn't cheat him again. It's just, and instead of doing something like I wanted them to do, was to actually build an organization outside the Democratic Party. By the way, that's not my idea. That's Bernie Sanders' idea. Bernie Sanders said before Before he became popular, he used to say there has to be a rainbow coalition and it has to happen outside the Democratic Party. That's what he used to say. And then as soon as he got popular, he stopped saying that because the Democratic Party put the fucking screws to him and he bends the knee. And what is the point of fucking voting for a guy who does that? I don't really know. He voted for the largest upward transfer of wealth in the history of the human race, and he got for it. And there's no answering for that, and he'll never make up for it. And he then threw his movement under the bus for Joe Biden. So he'll never make up for that. And by the way, the point is, you know how they all voted for it, the Iraq War, so then nobody's to blame. It's the same thing. Everybody voted for the CARES Act, so nobody's to blame. And they know that. Ro Khanna came on my show and gave me that bullshit excuse about, oh, well, we had to get that $1,200. You mean the crumbs? The that AOC called crumbs? You guys got rolled and you went along with it. You didn't even vote against it. They could have, and it would have still passed, but they voted for it. That's how up the two-party politics are.
Sanders, AOC, all of these progressives in Congress, what did you get for your endorsement of Biden this early? Yeah, I'll let you take a minute with that. Oh, right, you were supposed to ask for something. Elementary politics. They're constantly giving away their leverage, their power, everything. Just give it away, give it away, give it away. So 6 months before any voting takes place, all progressives in Washington are now doormats. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. Where are you? Where's the goddamn fight? I remember talking before they got elected about how they're going to give a good fight to the establishment. And I gave them every opportunity. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And
now this is where we get to Cornel West and his recent comments about Bernie endorsing Joe Biden. So as Political writes here, some politicians are so fearful of former President Donald Trump retaking the White House that, quote, they don't really want to tell the full truth, West said. Biden has created the best economy that we can get. Is this the best that we can get? You don't tell that lie to the people just for Biden to win. So this is where we get to Bernie Sanders and his response to these comments from Cornel West.
Well, my reaction is that certainly is not the best economy that we can create. That was what my speech was about yesterday. We've got to join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care to all. We've got to cut the cost of prescription drugs in half. We've got to raise the minimum wage to at least $17 an hour. We've got to build the affordable housing we desperately need. But where I disagree with my good friend, Cornel West, is I think in these really very difficult times where there is a real question whether democracy is going to remain in the United States of America. You know, Donald Trump is not somebody who believes in democracy, whether women are going to be able to continue to control their own bodies, whether we have social justice in America, we end bigotry. Around that, I think we have got to bring the entire progressive community to defeat Trump or whoever the Republican nominee will be. Support Biden, but at the same time, which is what I did yesterday, is demand that the Democratic Party, not just Biden, have the guts to take on corporate greed and the massive levels of income and wealth inequality that we see today.
All right, so before we have an honest conversation about this, I think it's important to point out where Cornel West was on this in 2020. So this is Cornel West on Mehdi Hasan's show on MSNBC. This was recorded, or at least shared, November 30th, 2020. Here is what Cornel West said back then about his vote for Joe Biden.
This year, you didn't go third party, did you? You voted for Joe Biden for the Democrat for president.
Part of an anti-fascist coalition, a coalition that said we've got to get Brother Trump out. He's a neo-fascist gangster. He calls into question the very possibilities of any kind of democratic politics. Looks like that coalition did come together. He's on the way out, we hope. And now we've got to deal with the neoliberal disaster of Biden and Harris.
So back in 2020, Cornel West agreed with the Bernie Sanders strategy of ensuring that Trump doesn't win, ensuring Republicans don't hold the presidency. He has changed since then. Now, it's also worth noting that back in 2016, Cornel West voted for Jill Stein in the Green Party, and he went on to discuss how he didn't expect Trump to win, and that he essentially regretted that vote, though it didn't matter as much because he's in Massachusetts, so Hillary's going to win that state anyways. But going to say, like, he learned from his experience in 2016 to then understand the need to get out Trump in 2020. Now he is running as a Green Party candidate and apparently no longer feels this way. So he's back to where he was in 2016. So I'm just, look, it's fine for people to change, change their minds and do whatever the hell they want. But it is worth noting here that Bernie has been consistent.
One of your chief political advisors is concerned that Cornel West is being taken advantage of by maybe people that simply want his name on the ballot. Do you have those concerns?
I really haven't followed it that closely.
Yeah, I haven't followed it very closely. I'm just a U.S. senator who ran for president the last 2 times out of the last 5 years and is longtime friends with Cornel West. But I'm not following it very closely. I don't know what my former campaign manager and still a senior aide, Fez Shakir, I don't know what he's saying. Listen, let's call it what it is. Cornel West is not some dainty, innocent flower. He's a grown-ass man, a spiritual man, a charismatic man, an intelligent man, a scholar. He's not some innocent, bystander that could easily be taken care of. The man has agency. He knows what he's doing. Whether you agree with it or not is up to you. But who's taking advantage of him? He knows what the stakes are. He has said Donald Trump and Republicans are fascist. He has called Joe Biden milquetoast neoliberal. I believe in many ways Joe Biden and Democrats are fascist in different ways, corporate fascism. But this whole notion that, he's being taken advantage of is nonsense. And Bernie should have called it nonsense. He's a grown-ass, brilliant man. He's not being taken advantage of. And shame on Chuck Todd for propagating that bullshit. But it wasn't only the dodge on Cornel West and the third-party run that I found interesting. Chuck Todd asked Bernie whether he believed we should have a more robust Democratic primary. Bernie's answer, again, was not really indicative of somebody advocating for a vibrant, strong democracy.
Do you think there would be a robust discussion on this on the left if there were a competitive primary? Do you think there should be?
Well, I think in this particular time, this particular moment in American history, when we're taking on somebody, the former president, who in fact does not believe in democracy, he's an authoritarian and a very, very dangerous person. I think at this moment there has got to be a unification of progressive people in general all over this country, people who are prepared to make sure that women control their own body, that we deal with climate change, that we represent the needs of the working class of this country and take on the billionaire class.
So, to be fair, I think Bernie is sincere. I think he was sincere in 2016 when he endorsed Hillary Clinton for fear of Donald Trump and fascism and what Donald Trump represents. I think he was sincere in 2020 when he endorsed Biden, trying to get rid of Donald Trump and Trump's fascistic tendencies and actions. But I think when he says at this particular moment, that's where he kind of loses me, because it's always this particular moment. It's always, this is the most important election of our lifetime. It's always, this election is different. It's always, you got to hold your nose because, the stakes are unique this time. Well, why is it going to be any different next time around when it's, Republican candidate DeSantis, maybe?
Yeah, Bernie was in Iowa, I believe, recently making the case for Biden. Biden is summoning every weapon at his disposal to make the case that you should not be disaffected or disillusioned or disappointed or any other dis word with the administration. And it's amazing. The squad members all obviously, now your former boss too. Back in Biden, he doesn't even sound pretty conflicted about it. I would love to support Cornel West, but it's just no, we got to back Biden.
We got to beat Trump. So here is, I think, what's so interesting. Bernie Sanders seems to sidestep in some ways the crux of Cornel West's criticism, which is, if you admit that we don't have the best possible economy under Biden, that Biden could have done other things and done them differently to put Americans in a better position economically than they are now, then where have been the calls to do exactly that? And what mechanisms are at your disposal as a senator at the United States Senate to pressure Joe Biden to do some of the things on that list that Bernie articulated there.
The problem was, hey, how do we get Donald Trump? And he never told us. He got Donald Trump because the Democratic Party, which is what he told us the first time, he was saying this is how screwed up it is. And the second time, he just started running around saying Donald Trump is you know what I know from Bernie Sanders' campaign? I know two things about Bernie Sanders. I know that he thinks Donald Trump is the most corrupt president in the history of the country, which is patently not true. I also know that he thinks Joe Biden is his good friend. That's all I fucking know. That's it. So that's a campaign. He sounded like every other Democrat. He wouldn't go after Joe Biden. He wouldn't say what the problem was. He wouldn't turn to Joe Biden and say, the reason why you don't understand the math behind Medicare for All, Joe, is because you're bought and because you're paid to not understand it. He wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't even run a campaign against them. He went beyond cowardly. Kyle uses the term cuck.